Oh, there we go. It worked.
Right.
All right, let me start over. Thank you, everybody, again for coming for our first reading meeting. So happy to have you all here with us. Again, Doug and I were so impressed and delighted by how many people came out to our initial organizational meeting. So to have so many of you again is wonderful. And I am unsure if we have anybody joining us for the first time, but if you do, hello and welcome. We're very glad to have you. Is it Suzanne that we have on the slide deck?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm
All
gonna make
right,
sure.
we can get to the next one. All right, excellent. So for today's overview, first, for your perusal, I came across this meme this week, and I figured it was appropriate for our book. Anybody that can't see it says, "I need to stand ankle deep in a creek about this." So yeah, today we are welcoming our guest guide, Tom Gardner, Professor Emeritus at Virginia Tech. And he'll be leading us through a discussion of chapters 1 through 3, as well as giving us a short reading from his own book, Poverty Creek Journal, which has some thematic and structural parallels to Pilgrim. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Again, I regret I wasn't unable to pick up a copy before, but I'm still working on it. So we can move to the next slide. Thank you very much. There. All right. Yeah, we've gone over this. We've got a wonderful picture of Tom there. So I think now I'll turn the floor over to you, and we can get started.
Okay, sounds good. So we have maybe 8 or 10 people here, and I can't tell how many people are
It's like
on the
one.
Zoom screen, but that's great. So I'm really just happy to do this. So I'm going to talk for maybe 5 or 10 minutes just about general ideas about the book. And then we're going to sort of try to talk a little bit about each of the 3 chapters. The second chapter, the seeing chapter, is the really thick, cool one. So we'll probably spend more time there. And then by 8 o'clock or so, I'll make sure that we stop talking about Dillard for now. And I'm just going to read a few pieces from a book I wrote, like Natalia said, that's sort of about this. So could somebody who's on that Zoom screen just wave your hand so I feel like you're hearing me? Perfect. And everybody in the room is meeting my eyes, so that's good. I'm not like this. Okay, so background. So if someone could flip to the background slide.
Should just be the next one.
Yeah, if we're in person, you actually have a piece of paper which you can actually see all this. But I'm just going to talk about background. So the book was published in 74. We talked about this last time, won the Pulitzer in 75. Dillard wrote it while she was living near Hollins College. She graduated in 67, did her master's in 68. After graduating, she was busy working on her first book of poems, but she started keeping a series of really elaborate notebooks. And I've seen some descriptions of them. I think they're in the Yale Library nowadays. So the notebooks were filled with accounts of her daily walks. So a lot of the stuff that's in this book, paragraphs from her reading, theological speculation, facts, about, grains of sand and all kinds of stuff. So really very random, but she wrote like mad. When she got the idea to do this book, she transferred, I think I put the number up on the screen, from the notebooks to 1,100 note cards, the stuff that she cared about. And I've seen some
amazing.
I've seen some of those note cards too. And then she spent a long time trying to think, how in the world do you order these sort of things into a book? And each of the books that she did since actually has a kind of a magic structural thing that she figures out for each book. But she eventually figured out that order and then went with her note cards, I think day after day and night after night, to the Hollins College Library, and had a carol there, and It probably did. Did various things, but did a lot of her writing there, sometimes for hours and hours and hours, and sometimes only a couple hours a day, and came up with this book. So there's a really good article about all this. So it's on the handout that's on paper, but if anybody on the screen cares about that article, just send me an email or send Doug or somebody an email. They'll get it to me, and I'd be glad to send you that. So I'm going to say two things about the structure of the book as a whole, which I probably read it 2 or 3 times before it actually came to me. So I thought it would be worth telling you about that. And then and then I have 2 quotes that are kind of overview quotes from chapter 1 about the book as a whole, and then we'll just dive into the chapters. So structure. So the first thing to realize is that the book is structured as a year. It starts in a January and ends in a December. It feels as if it's all the same year. That's what she wants you to think. But in some ways, it's stuff from many different Januaries put together. But it goes from January to December, which is exactly how Thoreau's Walden works as well. Thoreau lived in his cabin for 2 years, but he scrunched it down into one January to December sort of series of passages. So there's a present tense in each of, I'm a retired English professor, sorry, but there's a present tense in each of the chapters, or most of them, which you'll eventually hit, and it will tell you where you are. The first 2 chapters say in the early Januaries, I'm still in January. The 3rd chapter tells you we're in February. So it's a little bit, she's kind of playing with you a little bit, but we're supposed to imagine that the book is sort of narrated or spoken or written from that January, from a February, from a March. That's one thing. And then structurally, as the year goes on, different things kind of accrue to each month. But in the month, in the first January entry, she also goes to many other times from her note cards, many other people that she was reading, brings in speculations that she's had over the years. So the game we're playing is it's as if in the present tense January of writing or thinking or saying the book, she's also going over her favorite passages or other walks or memories or that sort of thing. Does that make sense? So it may not matter to you so much, but it helped me quite a lot because it's a little disorienting. I mean, she's so fast and so smart and so funny that you sort of forget where you are. But if you kind of keep yourself rooted in that month, I think that's one thing that's sort of helpful. So in the 2nd chapter, it's a January. She's thinking mostly on the present tense January day about seeing. And then that allows her to bring in cataract surgery, and that allows her to bring in a thing that she once saw, and that allows her to bring in being blinded when she was looking at hawks through a set of binoculars, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Did she really live on Tinker Creek?
Near it, yeah, right, yeah. I don't know if it was on her property, but it was according to the book, 2 or 3 properties down. Yeah, one funny thing, and the article that I have on this handout talks about that is people read this book and they think that she lives in a wilderness, but she actually lived in town. In a house with a husband and with neighbors who, if they're not on mountain or motorbikes, she don't even see them. But she sort of took all that away and sort of gave us the impression of woman and nature and God and not much else. But yeah, this was actually her neighborhood, essentially.
I think the article about the new Greenway spur in the paper interviewed a couple that live in a house.
Yeah, they have a bed and breakfast.
They have a bed
Yes.
and breakfast.
And they have the
Yeah.
book right there. And
Yeah.
we're hoping people are gonna come and stay there.
I know, that's a great gig. That's a great gig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that where you get this, the row of the suburbs?
Yeah, that's the title of the book that I found out about the note cards is called The Thoreau of the Suburbs, and the author is sort of suggesting, well, she wasn't all that much in the wilderness, nor was Thoreau.
True.
He
Yeah, that's a good
he went
point.
into Concord and had dinner with friends and did his laundry and all that sort of thing too. Okay, so that's one structural thing. Second structural thing, and this is probably the next slide, I'm guessing, is that, and you found this already, even the first 3 chapters, she's obsessed with 2 things about the natural world, right? She's talking about the created world, she calls it, And she's obsessed with its beauty and power and light. And she uses all those words together. And she's interested in its horror, in its fecundity, and its mindlessness. And even right at the beginning of the book, you got that, right? You got the toad sucked by the giant water bug. Natalia came up with a picture of it. I can't believe it. Both the toad and the bug.
It's on one of the slides, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually. It's really very cool and disturbing. So you have that horror image very early, and very early you have the image of the tree with the lights in it, right? And most people who remember the book, it's been around for 50 years, most people, if you talk to them, remember those two images. Now, they may not have finished the book, I don't know, but the horror right up front, the toad being sucked away, and then the tree with the lights in it. And those two ideas are the two main streams of the book. I think that one of the slides will say something like, she sees those as two branches of the same creek, horror and beauty. And this isn't on the slide, but it's on the handout. She also, in one of the later chapters, talks about twin fjords. We were just talking about Norway and Scandinavia. Twin fjords cutting into the mystery. And one fjord is the horror of the world, is the rapaciousness of it. And then the other fjord, also taking a cut at mystery, is beauty and light. So there's two streams, and you can find them in almost every chapter. But if you pull way back, it turns out that the first half of the book is mainly about light. And there's some, it's the via positiva, because she does it in religious terms too. It's approaching God through glory and light. And then the second half of the book roughly is approaching God through absence and darkness and horror. So the book is kind of hinged at the chapter called The Flood, right? And the flood actually didn't take place. It's a memory, but each chapter mixes the two, but roughly the light half is the first half, and roughly the light half is the second half. And then the book ends, it's talking about the book of Leviticus out of the blue, and there are two kinds of sacrifices that the Israelites were doing. And one was called, one was a Thanksgiving sacrifice, in which you would wave parts of the sacrificed animal. And then the other was called, it was a lament sacrifice, and it was called the heave sacrifice. And you heave the part of the animal, apparently. And she thinks of the book in some ways as both waving, at beauty, look at this, and then heaving, questions at God or the creator or the universe or the world itself, saying what in the world is going on here. So I think you can find both of those things going on almost simultaneously, but the book sort of tips from one way to another. So let me just stop there for a second. And I'd be glad to hear reactions to that or questions. And then I'll give you two kind of overview quotes on one of the next slides. I'm pretending to look at the screen, but I can't see your names. I sort of see your faces.
So he's gonna put the list of names up, he can call on somebody.
Now we'll do that. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving unless somebody shouts.
I mean, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did really appreciate that how you pointed out that it's like Walden, she's spends her year next to nature, and it immediately called to mind, I forget which chapter it's in, but she mentions coming up on a yellow light coming home from the creek or something like that, and it was so jarring to hear about a traffic light amid all of the beautiful natural imagery. And it was like so oddly mundane.
Yeah, but that's really kind of the point of the book, I think, is that essentially she says flat out that you can see the mysteries of the universe in your neighborhood, in the ordinary. It's sort of a Shaker Quaker idea too, but there it is, in the ring of your coffee cup or something like that. She can just go deeper and deeper and deeper. So yeah, I think it does sort of surprise you every once in a while, because you think this is going to be the deep wilderness, but it's actually the inner wilderness, I think, that she's finding in the ordinary. Yeah, that's a great thing to say. Yeah, anybody else? Well, let me just do two more these are quotes from chapter 1, and then I'm just gonna kind of lay it open and see what we have to say. So, in the first chapter is really the introduction to the whole book, even though it's set in January. And, one of the quotes, we have it on our handout here, and it's probably gonna come up on the screen too. But I'll read it because it's so beautiful. She says, "Our life is a faint tracing on the surface of mystery." Does that make sense? Here we are, but really what's below us and above us is mystery. Our life is a faint tracing on the surface of mystery, like the idle, curved tunnels of leaf miners on the face of a leaf. Okay, but that's interesting. So the sort of the blind movement on that leaf. We must somehow take a wider view, look at the whole landscape, really see it, and describe what's going on here. And that's what the book is for me. It's trying to take that wider view. It's trying to look at the whole thing, right? Not just the part that, you think you already know, and then describe what you see. And then this is just beautiful, and it's very much typical of the way she talks. Then we can at least wail the right questions into the swaddling band of darkness. Or if it comes to that, choir the right praise, right? Isn't that, if I look hard enough and see what's really in front of me and go as deep as I can into what's in front of me, then I could at least wail the right question, right? That's the heave, what's going on here, God, or what's going on here, universe. Or if it comes to that, choir the right praise. But most of us can't do either of those things because we're just kind of, she would say blind. We're mostly blind. We're just sort of moving through doing the next task. But if I can look closely enough and really describe it, then that leads me to the questions. And then the second quote, this is also chapter 1.
Sorry to cut in here, Tom. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Suzanne, with the slide, I have the quotes. Oh, there's the one that we just mentioned. No. I will fix this, so I'll be in charge of the slides next time. My apologies that I'm not on my PC today. I really appreciate your help with it.
Yeah, and you not only have the quote, but you have the little leaf miners.
Wow. I think they make such fascinating, little patterns, even if they are a bit of a pest in the garden.
Yeah. So think of that as us, and then think of how much that we don't see in our wanderings. But she's trying to get at the larger thing. So that's really talking not just about chapter 1. That's the whole book in that one. And then there's the next slide has sort of a version of this same idea. So I don't know who's got the slides on, but you flip to the next one. There you go. So still chapter 1, she says, "I propose to keep here what Thoreau called a meteorological journal of the mind." So that's a tricky phrase, isn't it? So I'm keeping a journal of the mind. It's meteorological because it's the inner weather of our minds, right? Depression, exaltation, lostness, right? All that kind of stuff. So she's trying, like Thoreau did in Walden, to give you a journal of the mind, not just the idea, but the feeling of living through the world, telling some tales, right? The tales of walking along the creek, describing some of the sights of this rather tamed valley. Okay, so don't be insulted. This rather tamed valley, and exploring in fear and trembling some of the unmapped dim reaches and unholy fastnesses to which these tales and sights so dizzyingly lead. Okay, that's a really fancy sentence, but do you see? As she tells tales and describes the sights, you understand that, of this valley, she's exploring, in fear and trembling, the high reaches, the unholy secret places to which the tales and sights lead. So she's giving you tales and sights. That's the whole point of the book. But she's giving you those tales and sights, not just for themselves, but to lead you or to lead her someplace else. Do you see? That's why this book has been such a great model for people. It's one thing to write a nonfiction book about your neighborhood or even about the wilderness, but it's another thing to take those things and be able to follow them out, to speculate with them. Do you see? So I scribbled a note to myself. This book doesn't have an argument, right? It's not that kind of nonfiction book, right? She's not trying to make an argument about the world. This is a book in which she's exploring the world, right? She's giving you things that are real, and she looks at them as hard as a human being has ever looked. But then the next step is to follow what, the way bugs do their thing, what that leads you to see, right? And sometimes it's unholy, sometimes it's terrible, sometimes it's ecstatic, sometimes it's way outside of words. And that's the whole point of the book,
Don't you
the
think
exploration.
this passage, Fear and Trembling, is an allusion to Kierkegaard?
Yeah, it is. And Kierkegaard's all through her notebooks. Yeah, and she would want you to know that. But Fear and Trembling is also straight out of the Bible, right? And the book is sort of drawn out of that and from any number of other religious traditions too. Yeah, exactly right. And I think she kind of winks and wants you to know that. So she would be glad. But you don't have to know it, of course, right? And there's a lot of this book that, you get smarter as you read it, and then you follow up where, because now we've got Google and all that, we can follow her up to see where it all came from.
That's true. I did immediately after putting it, I think it's chapter 2 down, look up the study about the newly sighted peoples. Yes.
Yeah.
That was so fascinating. So
yeah, we've got a comment here.
And I'm just amazed when I think how young she was when she wrote this book.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, she was born in, I'm terrible with math, but maybe 43, something like that, and 45, and the book comes out in, 74. Yeah, I know, really young. But boy, she read a ton and felt a ton and can write like an angel. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. So I said, I need to stop talking now, but I read this book in 74 or 5 when it came out. I was doing my master's in creative writing and then went off and did a PhD. And I got offered this job at Virginia Tech, and I thought, oh, I know this place because of this book. And I thought, well, and I'm gonna be friends with Annie Dillard, Of course, she left Roanoke in 75, years before I got here. But I was absolutely convinced I knew this area. Okay, so any other comments? That was sort of the general intro, background structure. Be glad to hear from the screen from people at home.
yes, I actually wanted to invite everyone that's chiming in via Zoom. Please feel free to chime in whenever. We'd love to hear from you as well, but no pressure.
Yeah, and you could probably put comments, and I bet Natalia could even read those comments.
Yes,
yeah,
I can. That would be also great. Also in the chat, I've added a link to the Thoreau of the Suburbs article that Tom mentioned. Unfortunately, it's behind a paywall, but there is, you can sign up for a free trial if you just want to check that one out.
Yeah, so that's in the Atlantic, and I had to get on my wife's account to get it. Just got a paywall. Virginia Tech didn't want to let me use the library anymore.
It's in the Atlantic?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's in.
I think it was published a couple years ago. Let's see, when was that?
17? 2015.
No, 15. Okay.
But you can just go in their archives and search if you have a subscription.
Okay, so anyway, we're going to shift, unless I hear from somebody, we're going to shift and maybe we'll just try to talk about the 3 chapters one at a time. So there's the intro. Let's do that first. I mean, we done some things, but I really just want to hear what you liked, what questions you had, what seemed to be going on, what drew you, what made you think, I don't know if I'm going to read this book or not. Anything at all that struck you about the first chapter, Heaven and Earth as Guests.
While we're waiting, here we have the aforementioned giant water bug. I had to look up what one of those looked like because I've never seen one. Yeah, they're pretty big. And based on Dillard's description of the iconic frog victim, wood frog seemed like a good potential candidate. So we have one of those there too.
I can chime in on chapter 1.
Sure, we'd love to hear your ideas.
It's just kind of one of the themes that came to my mind when reading it, that it was really The name of the chapter again is Heaven and Earth in Jest. And I just thought overall the chapter was about life's mysteries and just kind of the science, but then the mystic part of life in combination. That's just kind of the theme that I took away from it.
Yeah, so say a little more. I have this terrible habit of like actually being in conversations, but what you meant by mystery, because that's a word she uses all the time too.
Well, just that there's some unexplained, not thing, there's unexplained happenings that you are either aware of or not aware of that just occur. Like she really documents scientific things often. She notes the scientists and the studies, but then she goes beyond that and just saying there's things that happen that, haven't been written down. That's how I took it.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Be
she
aware.
starts. Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's really good. So mystery, just sorry, I bet I cut you off. Mystery for her kind of means these things that are just haven't been noticed yet, or we can't put language around, or we can't
right,
see all the way down. And
right.
then and then what she keeps wrestling with is, that's kind of where the title of the chapter must have come from, is are these things meant? Do they have a meaning? Right? Is there a creator, or is there some sort of force behind these things? And we're supposed to understand that mystery, or is it random? Is it meaningless? Is it a joke? Right? Do you think I
Yeah,
made this in jest? And she'll never settle on that, but that's what drives her, if this was somehow meant, if there's a meaning to this mystery, what in the world could that be?
it's definitely a tug of war because she does
Yeah,
put a lot of, scientific research in many of her chapters, but, then she's putting an equal amount of mysticism or mystery or things that we could question that have no answers to.
yeah. And what's kind of interesting to me is that a lot of, let's call it mysticism, comes out of the science. Once she describes it really hard and scientifically, then it drives her to these questions, you know, deeper than the scientists are asking, about the point or non-point of all that. That's a great set of things to say. Yeah. Anybody
Yeah, that's
else?
great. I see that we have a hand raised. Please remind me your
Katie.
name. Katie.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the part where she points out that beauty and grace are performed whether or not we have the ability to sense them. So the least we can do is try and be there. That was in relationship to her penny, um, her hiding the pennies. But then also the notion that cruelty is a mystery and a waste of pain. That intrigued me, that statement. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think both of those are really just fascinating things about it's our obligation to show up and notice the beauty. But that
yeah.
I wrote that line about cruelty out. I hand wrote it. That's how I try to understand things. And I don't know that I still got it either. You
Yeah.
want to say it again and talk about what it might mean? Cruelty is a waste of pain.
Well, I don't th nature to us we perceive it as cruel, but um humans are, I think, a more accurate definition of cruelty. Like, we do things that otherwise wouldn't be played out in nature. Nature's cruel by necessity, which humans don't have to be. It separates us from the animal kingdom, is that we can conceptualize problems and create solutions without cruelty. Uh, and so cruelty is completely a waste and it's unnecessary and it shouldn't exist outside of the animal kingdom.
Yeah, but then I think in a way she seems to find it in the animal kingdom too, does it? Do you
Right.
think?
That's the only place that it should. We as humans, it's just um it is a mystery as to why humans feel the need to act out in cruelty.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good reading. And then I was thinking that that word waste is kind of doubled, you know, it's like a wasteland of pain sometimes that we live through, or the animal world seems to be sometimes, but then also is waste like, wow, that was an awful lot of wasted effort just to make one bug, you know, to have 1,000 more or something like that. So that's what she's, you know, I mean, you can see that she worked this out in the notebook before she put that almost random, as if she talked it off the top of her head sentence. That's a really, right? I think she took a long, long time to think about how to phrase that to send this down there. That's a great comment. Thanks a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, anybody else thinking about that first chapter?
Something that stuck out to me immediately, this is the first time I've read this book, is that you can really tell when a writer is also a poet, like immediately. I usually would mark up my book, but it's from the library, so I can't. So I've been like sticky notes on like every page, but literally on the first page, like you have half a page, but I wrote, my twisted summer sleep still hung about me like sea kelp, and like just the rhythm and the cadence that she has in it, it's like it could be read out loud like a poem is. And it's almost as if like the sound of the language is its own character, like it holds as much weight as the image does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I loved the
That's really
introductory
good.
chapter.
And you keep hearing sounds and words coming back, like
Yeah.
this time through the book, that chapter, I kept hearing the word sway and versions of that, keep going.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very, there's a lot of movement
Uh-huh.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
bet that
living.
must come in revising, you know, you take something and then the more you revise it, you revise off of your ear, what your ear thinks is right. Yeah. And that first image too, that, right? No wonder there's a sticky, but
Yeah.
that one about her cat come, and you think, what in the world does that have to do with anything, right? That cat who comes and leaves bloody footprints and then you wake up and it's gone. Well, one, I learned that she borrowed that from a friend at a party who told her that story. But it's perfect. But you see, it's the whole book. It's as if we wake up on the days that we wake up to marks on us or marks on our psyche that are bloody and are ecstatic and are sexy and are driven and are nighttime, you know, and we have to make sense of them, right? That's the mystery. And what an image to start with. I was so jealous. I saw your hand.
Yeah, I read this book a long time ago, I think, probably too long ago. But right in the beginning, she said, I wake up expectant, hoping to see a new thing.
Yeah.
And I just thought I've only read the first 3 chapters again at this point, but she just really, I'm excited about what she helps me see reading the book.
Yeah.
And I thought about how, when I was in seminary in Chicago years ago, I took a class where the professor was talking about the life cycle and all this. And I thought about how those of us who believe in a God often think God's up here somewhere, but really the animals could live well without us. The plants could live well without the animals. You know, it goes down to, I thought, you know, maybe God's just a single cell that starts it all. But I just really appreciate the way she sees things that I don't see.
Until you wake up. Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
I saw your hand too.
I was, you talked about the cat and the bloody paws. That's how we start the book, chapter 1. I was looking at the end of the chapter 1 and she ends with talking about blood again.
Oh, the blood on the arrow.
Yes,
The
the
drops of
lightning
blood.
marks.
Ah, I never
So
thought
that
of
kind of
it.
comes back again.
Yeah.
It's like she's bringing us back
Yeah.
into that.
There, yeah, so that's no accident. But
Yeah.
I didn't see it. But that's the power,
Yeah.
right? She has that
Right.
image, and then that image sort of calls the ending into existence.
Coming back
almost.
in, yeah.
Yeah, but now so we can just riff on that. So now the bloody paws are not just on her chest when she wakes up. Now the bloody paws are the drops of blood up this foot.
Mhm.
That's we're waking up to and we're following. Right? She was trying to follow her imagination, that cat.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to follow pretty hard, but we're trying to follow those drops of blood she's
Well,
leaving behind us.
And she even says here, and this book is the straying trail of
Mhm.
blood.
Yeah, straying is also what the cat
Yeah,
said.
right.
Very nice. Oh.
I've
This
got
is why
a few hands up on Zoom as well. I want to give everybody a
Okay.
chance.
There you go.
No, I love hearing your discussions. I don't want to interrupt. It's great. I really appreciate everybody's thoughts. very thought-provoking. See the Zoom name Kinfolk. I'm sorry if I don't recall your name.
Sorry, that's my band name. I'm Julie.
Oh, that's really cool.
Hi.
Hello.
Just things that stuck out to us in the first chapter. Something that stuck out to me actually kind of spans chapter 1 and 2. There's a couple of things that she points out that prevents us from seeing, specifically as it relates to childhood, and I found that very interesting. In chapter 1, it appears to be pride. Some unwanted taught pride diverts us from our original intent, which is to explore the neighborhood, etc. She was talking about how an infant will look around the world and not know where he is and just be taking everything in.
Yeah, that's good.
And I found that very interesting. And then in the second chapter, we get the cataract surgeries and people literally seeing colors and shapes for the first time, and their perception changing with the acquisition of knowledge and experience. And I just found it very interesting that both of those are interacting with kind of childlike knowledge and seeing the world, but they're two very different symptoms that are preventing you from seeing.
That's a really good point.
So let's just follow that and shift into chapter 2. So the point of that chapter, or at least the cataract stuff, I mean, you probably said it better than I'm going to right now, but it's as if she reads that about what it would be like to come out of that surgery seeing a world without having the ability to verbalize it, right? And it's as if she's wishing herself back to, you were almost calling it childhood or being an infant, or she's wishing herself into that state that you might be in if you've never seen the world before and you suddenly see it. And then go ahead.
Sorry. That particular passage actually reminded me of something I've experienced whenever I'm hearing a melody for the first time in an ensemble setting, and you're just hearing the melody with nothing else surrounding it, and you've never heard it before. I have frequently mistaken what the melody will be once the rest of the music is built around it. And it's a very beautiful thing because you can never go back to it once you get to know the melody and the full piece of music. So I very much resonated with that.
Yeah. And then the book becomes, let's see if you would agree with this, it becomes her almost doing a series of experiments to try to get back to there, right? How do you get back to no words for something? How do you get yourself dizzy enough, or how do you tune out that constant tune in your ear that tells you know how that melody goes? How do you get there? This book that I wrote about running, a lot of running for me is actually that. If you run long enough or at a certain kind of rhythm, eventually you stop thinking, and you stop noticing with words where you're doing what you're doing. You're just sort of passing through the landscape as a body. And I bet you do that as a musician, and she clearly seems to do that as a walker. How do we get ourselves back to a state where we can see in that kind of unmediated way? And eventually she just says in that chapter, I don't know. You can't do it. You can't try. It just has to come to you, Perfect set of questions. Yeah.
We have
Natalia,
one more
did you have
hand.
somebody else?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I said, did you have somebody else too?
Yes. We've got Thomas and.
Oh, I had my hand up about the first chapter, but I've enjoyed where the conversation's been going.
I mean, we can go back. There's no problem there. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get to you earlier.
No, it's okay. It's all good. In fact, on the topic of the seeing, I don't know, I guess it's all kind of connected, but the thing that I appreciated about the first chapter, in listening to how a lot of us are responding to it, is how the I never thought about Annie's language as kind of, it's just very skillful, but also I never thought about it as pulling me into a state of disorientation. But when I was reading it, it just was very hard to stay oriented. And I think that's because she was just very skillful at transmitting her experience of being disoriented, and her finding stable places, such as that sycamore limb. She enjoys coming back to that bridge, that sycamore bridge, and this place of of fixed location and trying to get herself in a place where she can apprehend what's going on. It didn't matter. The repetition of being dizzied and dizzying and dizziness and spun around was definitely reflected, I think, in the language. And so I guess tying into that second chapter about the seeing, I kind of just would imagine when I was reading about people who were operated on and had the ability to see and then the desire to not see anymore. I just could appreciate that. I'm not sure if others connected with that, but it just seemed as though learning about that experience, it could be a really scary prospect for somebody who is maybe reading this book or thinking about nature and thinking about the outdoors and thinking, my gosh, this is quite the wager here. If do I really want to go? Do I really want to go? It just seems scary, and I don't know if the terror kind of sunk in varying degrees to other readers as well about that possibility.
That's really a really cool set of things to say. So I would really agree with this. I think what you're saying is that the style in a way seems deliberately packed and it makes jumps really quickly. And it seems to be deliberately done that way to unsettle us, right? To kind of get us unmoored so that we have to start paying attention in a different kind of way. Yeah, and I would first read and kind of go like this inside and write notes and try to hold it together. But then eventually you almost have to just kind of go with the flow. And I love what you said, and wait till you hit a stable place, like the bridge or the barbed wire, or the she keeps going back to the place where she saw the frog, or she'll keep using a number of quotes over and over, but she'll eventually give us a hand, let us see something in that unsettled place. Yeah. I wonder if everybody loves that or not. I can tell that you did, and I know that I do. But I have every time I read a new book that does that to me, I have to kind of learn to like it. At first, I feel like I remember at Tech when I would teach Gertrude Stein, who's a great poet, but I would describe to students the first day I was trying to read it, and I just threw the book across the room because it wasn't even English as far as I could tell. But eventually you kind of learn to live in that uncertainty. So Thomas, you like that, right?
I let me say this. I'm in the process of acquiring the taste.
You've made it through 3 chapters, so I mean, you're
Actually, in chapter 1, I said, I don't know if I can do that. I said, I don't know what she's talking about. But what's funny, I mean, I'm encouraged to hear that, okay, we'll come back at it another time, even just paging through it as we're in conversation tonight. There is a sort of a magical opportunity to kind of engage with it and acquire it. And I say that with the utmost respect to the fact that, the book that's a little bit too easy is maybe a book, we might not want to put too much time in, but the one that has that mystery and has that sort of disoriented but beautiful momentum to it is it's a cool thing, and it's a cool thing to not have to do it alone. So I'm really appreciative that we're doing this together.
Yeah. So anybody else want to talk about that disorientation, that disorienting feeling?
And after that, sorry to interrupt really quick. We had one more hand. I don't know if we have Katie Brooks wants to chime in, so we can have maybe one or two reactions to the disorientation.
Okay, so how about if I take a reaction in the room, and then Katie, could you go next?
I felt like I was falling down rabbit's hole.
You were falling down rabbit holes.
Yeah, just out, bong and then bong. Because you get started on something and then all of a sudden she's, popped you back up and you go and fall down another one.
And were you okay with that, or did you hate it?
No, I did not like it.
And that's why I gave that first 15-minute talk to say, hang in there, there's a structure. We're gonna come to March and April and May. Okay, yeah, Katie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to what we were saying about seeing, because I had written down a few different parallels that I was picking up on, and one of them, or this one isn't a parallel, but that tension between the pure sensation of when you don't when you're able to unpeach the peaches, I guess, versus that muddy river that can't be dammed. So like being able to just see without adding in all the thought and maybe the analysis and the interpretation. And I was kind of thinking about the process of sight, which she gets into, the fact that like the act of seeing first is the sort of optical signals and just light. Then the second part of seeing is the brain actually interpreting it so it can identify what you're seeing. So I kind of felt like she was emulating that process a little bit by kind of being and doing both. And I paralleled that with the idea of being the illuminator versus the illuminated, which I guess is in winter. But she talks about it's that moment about the snow and the light on the snow and whether the sky or the snow is darker.
Yeah.
And the thing that's illuminated can't be darker or can't be lighter. Sorry, let me go back to my notes. The thing that's illuminated can't be lighter than the illuminator. But just those two parts, the actor that's the illuminator and the actor that's the illuminated, is happening all the time in here. And she's playing both of those parts too. You know, when she's writing the book, she's illuminating for us. She's illuminating these artifacts, these observations, these characters that are outside. But then she's also being illuminated as well. And I brought that back to she talks about I can't create the light, but the best I can do is to just be in its beam. And I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm making any sense, but these are sort of parallels that
Following.
I'm being a little bit abstract, I guess, and I don't want to use too many of her words, but I was just thinking about that and about you know, you can bring God into that, but just the idea of can you just see and not add in all that the rest of it? And I think you know, she's not making an argument. We talked about that, but I think she's reckoning with the tension between adding all that in, the muddy river, the mind that keeps working. And I think the way that she reckons with that is observing first, just looking, and then letting it in later and doing the writing and then illuminating for us. So that's,
Wow, that was a whole lot.
I'm sorry, I
That was
don't know
really,
if that made any sense.
no, it made a lot of sense. Can I try to say it back in my own words? This is how I think.
Please.
So I love that going from the snowstorm to her and saying that she's in a way like the snow that's illuminated by light or the divine or some mystery. And she shows herself being lit up. So that, I think that's a really cool connection. And then what you were, by going back to that stuff about language, you were getting at how she tries to put herself into a position where she gets lit up. And to get in that position, you have to somehow get dizzy or get blinded or get outside of your language. And she keeps saying over and over that, of course, you can't get outside of language. And she says that in language, which is kind of the joke of the book. But you can somehow put that language aside and keep on moving through it, like Thomas when he's reading, you know, waiting to be lit up. So I didn't catch more than a third of what you said, but I think that's really rich. The book is kind of a series of experiments for how to get yourself out of the way, you know, to let the light pass through you. And you can't cause it. You really, she says, don't even bother spending your time trying to shut your language off. Just let your language go and do its thing. Right? I do that when I run. Just let that little symphony in my head go on, but then you can get underneath of it somehow. That's what the book is trying to do. I love that. That was really great.
Yeah, that was wonderful. We've got probably about 10 minutes until we'll need to move on to the next part of our meeting. I see one hand, and I saw someone else have a hand. I think it was Rachel. I don't know if maybe you weren't sure if I was going to get to you, but if you'd like to say your piece, you would be next.
Sure. I was just going to go back to the discussion about how unsettling sometimes this book is to read. Just kind of point out, like, for me, when she goes back to the house, like, I almost want to describe it as a cabin, even though I know it's not a cabin, it's in the middle of this neighborhood. But she talks about that as being very, like, comforting, and like she immediately compares it to Tinker, which is very dynamic and changing, and there's like a lot of uncertainty around her outside world, even though she doesn't quite understand her place in it. Like, it immediately comes across that she respects it. And so I don't know, I just found that you know, it seems like really, really disorganized and chaotic sometimes when she's describing what she's seeing outside of like the comfort of her home. And like, you know, it's this the home is like her anchor in this mountain that she returns to, like, for routine and like comfort and safety, and like where her spiders are her friends that she doesn't like kick out of her home. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, and you know, this is too much teacher in me, but that's actually a summary of the whole third chapter. You know, the third chapter happens during the snowstorm, and basically she says, well, the world looks really different during a snowstorm, and I see these signs that neighborhood boys put up with their, you know, motorcycles or whatever, probably motorcycles, but then she spends most of the book inside her house listening to the howling wind and saying there are unsettling things, but I'm going to spend my time reading and preparing and not always looking into those dark corners. So, you know, when I was getting this ready this afternoon, I was looking at this thinking, well, I don't have anything to say about that chapter because all the cool stuff is, you know, 1 and 2, and then this one is going inside. But you, Rachel, right? You just did this like brilliant version of why she had to go inside. You know, you have to go inside and prepare yourself and have that sort of stable place to think and work from. Oh, that. So yeah, we're gonna probably stop in about 5 minutes, but if somebody doesn't mention the tree with the lights on, I'm gonna like walk to my car. Like,
really quick, we have one more Zoom participant that have been very patiently waiting. Bess and Jolie, please feel free.
Thank you. You know, what struck me about the overwhelming thing is one paragraph has so many facts in it. It's like she floods you with facts. And what I enjoyed a lot was I'd never really enjoyed reading on a reader like Google, you know, using Hoopla. I've never enjoyed it. But I looked up every single thing I didn't know. And it's taken a long time to get through just 2 chapters, and looked at pictures of things I'd never heard of. It is an overwhelming amount of information, and it's all beautiful, but it's almost like you could spend 2 months on just one chapter learning about what she's referring to.
It's like each of them is almost a prose poem, each paragraph.
It reminded me of, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson's movie Magnolia, where you were just hit every minute with another idea visually. It was kind of like that for me. And the last thing I wanted to say was, it strikes me that when you're looking for something, like when I'm just jumping ahead a little bit, you know, she's looking for certain insects sometimes, and she's read about something and then she's seeking it. And as she's seeking it, she's seeing so many other things. There's something about us, like the hunter-gatherer. We go out. I know I just moved here from Indiana, where people really look for morel mushrooms every spring, box turtles mating every spring, and geodes. But once you get out there and you're looking for a specific thing on the ground, all of a sudden you see dozens and dozens of more things, because you're looking so carefully with a focused mind that you're not thinking about your kids, the laundry, life's troubles. You're just looking at the dirt. And I just felt like that might be part of the key to seeing, is if you're looking for something specifically that's beautiful, you're going to see a whole lot more, which is, I'm just throwing that out there. That seems to be kind of what happens with her too. And
You know, do you remember that sentence where she talks about is it something like the artificial obvious? You know, you like set up a framework and then you can see what's
yeah,
been, I might have quoted that wrong, but I think that's what that means. You set up a framework saying, I'm looking for a certain kind of mushroom, but then within that framework, the whole world is suddenly there. That's great. Somebody make me happy. How about the tree with the lights in it? Anybody like that passage?
oh,
I'll have you know that for the discussion thoughts for discussion slide that I must have accidentally put in the wrong place. So because we kind of skipped over it, I did have a picture of a tree with some lights in it. So just kidding.
Where was that?
Yeah, that looks like a Terrence Malick movie, actually.
Well, it's a stock photo, but it's a
Okay.
nice one.
So Natalia, and everybody, I'm gonna shift now, okay? So you've got like 4 more weeks to talk about the book. So this is just a start. And I don't know who's gonna lead next time. But
you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah.
Probably speak for all of us. That
So anyway, I'm
hearing your
making a
expertise.
transition. I'm gonna make a transition. I'm gonna just read for 10 minutes from a book that I brought along, and I'll get you out of here by 8:15, I promise. And if anybody has to leave early, I won't even notice. So this is it's a book I did about 10 or 12 years ago now, called Poverty Creek Journal. I didn't literally have Tinker Creek in mind, but surely part of my mind had it. I had other models that I was thinking of, Robert Hass's prose poems, a guy named Guy Davenport, who I love, and that sort of thing. But this is a book that I had wanted to write about running for a long time, and I run 30, 40 miles a week and forever. I've been doing it forever. And I hadn't been able to write it. And I finally got the idea of taking my running journals, which now I see Annie Dillard did. And for a year, I would keep my journals, which I, write after I finish running, but make them a little bit longer. And then I started to pick out one entry out of the 5 or 6 each week. And then as I revised it, sort of blow it up into a prose poem. So when we were talking about this Dillard book as being a series of packed prose poems, one after another, my skinny little book is just 52 paragraphs. So 1 paragraph a week, nothing like the Annie Dillard, but it charts the year of running. It charts what I was thinking of as I was doing the activity called running. And I was thinking about running, like looking for mushrooms, but I was also thinking about my body. And I was also thinking about the light. I was also thinking about my children. And eventually there's a trauma to me and that sort of thing. So in some ways, it's very much like an Annie Dillard paragraph without, other than I had read the book 3 or 4 times, 4 or 5 times by that point. I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but the more we've gone on tonight, I thought, oh man, I should give her a credit in the back. So I'm just going to read a little bit to you. It'll be hard to follow, but probably not anywhere near as hard to follow as what we were just working at. The entries are only a paragraph long, and I allow myself to jump just like she does. So it's sort of like a runner's mind, thinking about one thing and then thinking about another and thinking about another. And if I do it right, I'll pause between sections so you can kind of feel where the jump takes place. So I'll just read the date and then 5 or 6 entries, depending on what we have time. So January 6, 2012, this is the very first one. Finishing up the run this morning, cresting the ridge above the pond into a sudden blinding sun reflecting off the ice, as if the light were alive, preparing to speak, and then turning ordinary again as I came down the ridge and the angle changed and the light pulled back into itself. My right calf is still a little stiff from where I strained it last week, doing mile repeats in the cold, just enough to not let me out of my body. When Emily Dickinson writes about Jacob, she never mentions his limp, even though that awareness of limits is everywhere in her work. Instead, she writes about his bewilderment, cunning Jacob, refusing to let go until he had received a blessing, and then suddenly realizing as light swung silver fleeces across the hills beyond that he had been wrestling all night with God. He had seen God's face and lived. The limp is what we take away. It means there must be a way back. It almost goes without saying. So I'm not going to comment on them other than I'm reading this and I'm embarrassed. There's all this Dillard stuff, right? There's that I almost stole from her. There's light, there's the light speaking, there's the limp, there's bewilderment, there's the ordinary, there's all the stuff that we've just been talking about. So I think there must be a lot of us who have absorbed that book. So this is February 2nd, 2012. So it's entry 5. I'm running 7 miles most mornings, usually in a few minutes more than an hour. It's funny how little that matters. The distance I remember and the effort, even a few moments like the light on the pond as I was finishing up this morning, fuller than a month ago, but not the time. I wear a sports watch and note the time in a journal, but I'm not really sure why. By the next day, it's gone from my head. Years ago, I'd measure the run by the kitchen clock, and before that by the bells at college, but none of that has stayed with me. Time moves differently out there, a bit like half sleep, when you're awake and away, but aware of dreams passing in a kind of unretraceable wandering. When I sleptwalked in Wisconsin, just before our daughter Anne was born, I'd often find myself at an upstairs window, staring across the street at the foundry a few blocks away, floating above our neighbors' roofs. I'd hear rail cars coupling and see steam rising, men above the roofs in a blue light, almost dancing as they worked. Laura would find me there, the turning colors passing through me, and although I tried to say what I was seeing, nothing I said made sense. Huge piles of snow below, the house a fortress behind heaped up walls, the two of us staring out into the dark, content to let our language go. No real way to put any of this into numbers, mile after mile, just streaming through me. February 13th. Struggling again with my calf this morning. A dull ache about half a mile into the run, as if my body were no longer my own, no longer transparent. Each step is a reminder of some uneasiness I can't quite locate. My mother tells a story of a plane crashing into the field behind their house the winter she was 4, one of her first memories. Her sister was a baby in arms. They were eating dinner and heard it sputter and come down, her father out the door to see what could be done. When he didn't come back, her mother bundled them up and went out. She saw the broken bodies. A commercial airliner with 13 aboard, all killed. Cars everywhere, people tramping through their yard, headlights peering in. For years, she was terrified of open fields. The sky, as Elizabeth Bishop puts it, having proved itself quite useless for protection. Whenever a crop duster or a small stunt plane would pass over, my mother would run for a tree or something to hide under, no longer at ease with the world. There was no fire, she said. That was much later. A week before her wedding, her father dumped a load of sawdust on a smoldering heap outside their house. He was sanding the floors, fixing the house for the day. The heap exploded. He was burned on his arms and face. When he walked his daughter down the aisle, he was unrecognizable. His skin burned black as the sky at night. February 29. My brother John died yesterday of a heart attack in his sleep. He was 58, skiing in Utah with our brother-in-law. Calling my parents with the news was the hardest thing I've ever done. He was 18 months younger than me, but up until we finished college, we were pretty much the same person, although back then neither of us would have said so. Cold rain this morning, 45 degrees, crying hard by the time I hit the pond. Losing him so suddenly, my brother Dan said, was like having a hole torn through your body. He's right. Most races back in high school, John would sit just off my shoulder, although he was the better runner. He had a swimmer's body, smooth, fluid, not as angular as mine. I can see him now, that long blonde hair, no hips, a look back as he shakes himself free and strides ahead. Hands brushing his waist, those old satin shorts. I can feel him pull away now, here, in my body. March 10. Dad's sobs echoing through the church when we brought John's body in. That was like him dying all over again. March 18. Home again, teaching. No one quite knows what to say. I don't either. Jamie, Ralph, and I meet at the library to run the bike path. It's early Saturday morning, still dark when we begin. I'm wondering who will bring it up. I start to tell the story of my student who pulled a ceramic bowl and a cloth bag out of his backpack when it was his turn to speak in the seminar last week. He opened the bag and shook a pile of ashes into the bowl. Love letters from 3 women who meant the world to him, he explained, setting the bowl in the center of the table. None of us understood. I can't get the story out anyway. Ralph and I brush elbows at first, every few strides. When it gets light, I catch Jamie glancing at me on the uphill sections. It was like this in the empty church, waiting for the funeral to begin, I say. A few of us at a time would move toward the casket. Someone else would peel off and pace. A niece would lean over a pew and whisper. Another would slide in. No real words yet. Morning light as the time passes, 3 of us running together. After class, my student walked to the window and poured the ashes into the wind. It's not like that. Not entirely. We don't have to let him go. And then just one more. This is April 11th. Big wind all night. What we had 2 days ago. You hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going, Jesus said to Nicodemus. That high, unanswerable wailing. The word in Greek is pneuma, spirit or wind. Whatever it has left me tender and raw. The trail this morning is littered with pine tips, the torn smell of evergreen everywhere. The same steady roar, but now I'm under it. The trail sliding down along the creek, the wind camping out on the ridges. On runs like this, we put our heads together to talk, a hand on an elbow sometimes, when a misstep would set the other flailing. Now I'm alone, wordless, with the strangest sense of being set apart to mourn or notice. I'm not sure which. The wind above us, moving across space. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. Even that was torn out of Dillard, set apart to mourn or notice, the 2 things that she was talking. So, Natalia, you can end it, but I think that's all the time that we have.
Thank you for
But-
meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Tom, I'm really curious. Is there a best place for us to purchase your book or borrow it from the library? I'd really like to get a copy. Those are beautiful.
Yeah, so I hope your libraries have them. I don't know. In Blacksburg, Runabout Sports has it, which is a big thrill for me and my family that a running shoe store carries it. I actually brought 2 copies with me that I'd be glad to sell at my author's discount to anybody who's actually here in person. But and Amazon has it. Amazon has everything, so it's pretty easy to get. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Well, thank you very much for sharing it. It's really beautiful. Well, oh yeah, so we are coming up on time. Taken away from the present moment. If we could keep going on the PowerPoint, I've got our upcoming schedule. Here we are. So I had this last time. I'll double check to make sure that it's posted on the link there, roanokearts.org/tinker. Pretty much all of our updates will be there, and also in the weekly arts emails that Corey puts together. Our next meeting is going to be February 25th. Still talking with a few people that have expressed interest in perhaps being a guest guide or somehow otherwise sharing their expertise or similar interests.
And Natalia,
Yes.
Suzanne Thornley, who's on the call, has agreed to be our guide at the next session.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
Yeah. So we'll be sending out her bio and some quotes and such coming up this weekend with the announcement and a reminder about the pages to read. But let me offer Suzanne just if you want to unmute and just say hello, and if there's anything we should keep in mind as we're reading.
Hello, everyone. I'm looking forward to next week. It's going to be a hard act to follow after tonight. I'm not an academic or a teacher, but actually 25-year mindfulness practitioner. And we're going to focus a bit on the chapter of the present, but also go back and give a nod to the 2 chapters before that. So there'll be some quotes going out to think about, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week and guide you
wonderful
together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. We really appreciate it. We can keep going with the slide. I've got the pages for our next reading. And Suzanne, maybe you'll have a better question or a couple of questions to keep in mind while we're reading, but this is one, and turns out that we touched on it already in our discussions today. What, if anything, have you found surprising or challenging? As always, standout or interesting passages. Love to hear some of what you all really reacted to. So I really loved hearing what everybody picked out today. So for next time, we'll be reading pages 54 through 103. Got chapters 4 through 6. And in our next slide, I think we've got another reminder of the time. And in the next slide, we've got our my and Doug's emails. And it should also, Doug, is it posted on Tinker, the Roanoke Arts Tinker page, our emails, or?
Yeah, they're there. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, so if you need them, reach out anytime, and we're always happy to hear from you. So that should conclude our first reading and discussion meeting. Thank you again so much, Tom, for your expertise and for everyone's insights and discussions. It's been really, really wonderful hearing everyone. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Natalia.
All right, well, have a good evening and the rest of the week. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Natalia.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thanks.
Thank you for
All right, I'll stop the recording now.
Yeah.
Is the recording gonna be something?
Yes, yeah.